Welcome to the Build to Scale B2B Growth Strategies podcast. My name is Reem Benchar, your host, and today we have a special guest joining us, Humberto Buniotto, CEO at Opus. Humberto, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for making some time to come to the podcast. So where are you based?
I'm based in Denver, Colorado, just outside of Denver, actually.
Cool, cool. Is it getting cold? Probably.
Yeah, it's been in the east. We got a lot of sun here, so it's fine. It's good. I love it. Having lived in Miami before, I love this weather a lot more.
Really? That's great. I'm actually based in Florida and Sarasota.
Nice.
Sometimes the heat makes me want to move to a cooler place as well. So maybe I'll end up in a cooler area at some point. Cool. Well, so happy to have you here on the podcast. Can we start with maybe you giving us a quick intro on yourself and maybe your journey up to the role that you have today at Opus?
Sure. So Opus was originally created as an in-house product for or software solution for a behavioral health treatment company based in South Florida. They started back in 2012, and at the time, there weren't a lot of EMR solutions in our space. There were a lot of EMR solutions, but not specifically for behavioral health. And the founders decided, why don't we just build our own EMR? It was simple enough at the time. 10 years ago seems like yesterday, but it was a long time ago when it comes to technology. And they hired a team of developers to build this. They put about 2 years worth of work into it and made some progress, but they didn't really have anything that was useful or that they could actually use across their growing practices. And so they brought me in 2016 to kind of push the reset button and give it another try. So my initial charge was mainly resetting priorities, relaying out the scope of work, what we're trying to build, and get something sort of a minimum viable product in place, which we did in about 8 months. And over the last 10 years, I've taken different roles in the company and primarily in operations. Most of it was just trying to get us to do things more efficiently, work with our clinicians to learn about the need, work with our end customers to learn about the need and put them into solutions. And about a year and a half ago, I took on the CEO role, and that's where I've been at since.
Very cool. I think I was mentioning to you before earlier, when we were prepping for the episode that, most people we speak with are founders or even CEOs that we speak with have co-founded or founded the company, but it's really rare for us to meet people with your profile who have kind of climbed up the ladder in a way, but in a smaller company that's in tech and a SaaS company. This is more unusual. Was it always a aspiration for you to get there, or was it just kind of the right place at the right time and you kind of the opportunity arose and you went for it?
Yeah, it just kind of happened. I came in sort of in a starter role with the company. We were at the time, I think we had 5 engineers and that's it. I mean, we did not have sales, marketing. It wasn't a company. It was just an in-house thing. And I think I just got lucky because our founder is very entrepreneurial, very tech savvy, just very interested in how can we make things more efficient, how can we do things better. And for better or worse, a lot of the success of his companies have had to do with the same reason we became a company, which is I wonder if we can do this better than these other vendors that can sell us this product. Like I mentioned in the beginning, there were some EMRs in the space, but they were just kind of starting and it didn't really justify paying for them. So he just decided, how hard can it be? And that has been his approach to pretty much all of his ventures. And it's refreshing because it's companies and especially founders, especially if there's a lot of money involved, especially, building a SaaS company is not cheap. They tend to kind of be very conservative about the approach. And with our founder, I think the reason I got lucky is because he has always given me a lot of latitude in terms of just here's the grand idea. Now you're going to go out and put it in place. He doesn't really micromanage the process, right? He actually participates actively in what can I do to help you get there? And I've had the pleasure to, not just participate in Opus, but other companies that are part of the group. And at every step, it's always been the same. Here's the idea. What can we do tomorrow to make it happen? And sometimes it failed. Sometimes we try stuff and it just didn't work out. But the just having that ability to work for somebody that is not afraid of innovating. I'm not a founder, but I feel like I am, and I feel like I own the company. And in a lot of ways, I think if you ask our employees, they feel the same way. And that's just a kind of a top-down vision for our company.
That's nice. And I am pretty sure that's not as common in the startup space where the founder is really giving, that kind of latitude to his team and he's understanding and he understands that, things fail and that's fine. I think that's refreshing to hear.
I know a lot of startups, and most of them are run by founders. And I think it comes with like just having the knowledge. When you start a company, likely you identified a problem that nobody has solved for, so you dive in and you're like, I'm going to figure this out. It wasn't the case for me, but I do feel like I am a founder.
I can see that. So tell me more about Opus. So I know you mentioned you're kind of serving the behavioral health industry. Can you tell me more about what you guys do and how you're helping the industry?
Yeah, so there are lots of VMRs in the healthcare space. I don't know, some people know the name Epic. They're like a hospital-based EMR, and they're a massive company, and they really just focus on like you go to a hospital, everything that happens there. Then there's specific EMRs for different specialties, and Opus specifically focuses on behavioral health services. So substance use treatment, ABA, eating disorders, things like the mental health, inpatient and outpatient, telehealth in person. And so we only focus on that. Over the years, we've had companies in related specialties like nursing homes, for example, that have asked us to kind of branch off. And we've been hesitant to do it because startups generally, especially in the first like beginning phases of a startup, you tend to go down where the business is. And there's a lot of business in the nursing home space. But we were hesitant to do it because we're really real believers in doing a couple of things really well than doing a bunch of things kind of mediocre. So Opus specifically focuses on behavioral health, nothing else. And so all of the feature functionality that we have as part of our solution is focused on the behavioral health space. I think we're strategically positioned to deliver these solutions in a much more efficient way because we came from the provider side, right? I didn't have to learn secondhand from like a team of research and development. How does an admissions team does an intake, or how does a clinician see a patient in a group setting or an inpatient setting? I was there with them, participating every step of the way. And so were different, staff members in our team. Oops, I think we got to start there because I messed up my. So can
Go
I
for
pick
it.
up where I left off?
Absolutely.
So I think, even team members that have participated in building the product, they were there. We didn't hire a third-party company to tell us how to build an EMR. And so for that reason, when we do demos with customers or when they see our product compared to other EMRs, that even some of that are in our space, you kind of get a little bit of a wow factor. How do you guys know to this kind of extent how we actually do our jobs, right? We get that a lot.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. Initial business model really being a behavioral health company slash clinic asking for specific software to be customized for them. And then you guys essentially commercializing this and giving, access to probably thousands and thousands of other companies to the software. It is a more unique approach, and I understand how that's putting you in a much better position because you really really understand your ideal client profile, operations needs at such a deep level. So
Mm-hmm.
that's an interesting approach and learning.
It certainly came with growing pains because so around 2017 is when we had somewhat of a base product that was functional and allowed our companies to do the intake and to the notes and kind of like basic functionality, nothing even close to what we have now. And we started selling into companies that we did business with that referred patients to us and vice versa. Natural, because they would come in and they would see the product and be like, oh, what is this Opus? And we would show it to them and they would contract with us, but not in any like strategic way. But pretty quickly around 2018, we learned that we had over customized a product to our company. And so we kind of had to hit the reset button again. We did a complete rewrite of the product, which is actually like a blessing in disguise because we needed to do some rewrite anyway and improve some things that we had learned along the way. But he certainly came with some pain having kind of discovered that not everybody does business the way we do it, and so the product we have now is a lot more generic, if you will, allows us to actually claim that we serve all behavioral health.
That's interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. I always say every failure hump comes with some kind of, blessing at the end. So it's good that you guys were able to adjust your product accordingly for what the market really needs.
Yeah, in the startup, I think there's this rule of the 80-20 rule, which is 80% of what you build is going to be used by 20% of your customers, and 20% of what you build is going to be used by 80% of your customers. We had focused on building like this monstrous kind of lots of different, widgets and things. And it turns out like most people are just only going to use those like four core items. So that's where we're at now.
That makes sense. Cool. Well, thank you for giving me an introduction on your product and the journey behind building it. I think that's definitely really interesting and different than, what we see traditionally in the startup space. So in terms of your industry, and it can be SaaS specifically, or it could also be SaaS within behavioral health, what are some big trends you're seeing on the market that are worth noting that maybe are going to be bigger this year in 2025?
Yeah, I would say obviously AI is top of mind for not just behavioral health, but healthcare and just pretty much any industry now. But in behavioral health, and I think healthcare too, we're seeing this has been happening for a few years, but a shift into value-based care. So the traditional insurance model is somebody comes in for a visit, the practice or the clinician bills the insurance company $100 for a session or something like that. And in behavioral health, there's a shift to hold practices. I'm going to use the term more accountable for lack of better term, but basically they want to make sure that practices treating patients for behavioral health have a vested interest in their success. And that's a product of 10, 15 years of fairly recent services for things like addiction treatment. It wasn't something that was, considered, like, insurance companies didn't cover until recently, until like the Affordable Care Act. And so when a new service like addiction treatment is started to be covered, early insurance companies will just say, okay, I guess we're paying for this now. And over time they get sophisticated, right? So they'll start looking into relapse rates. So the relapse rate in substance use is very high, right? I think it's the latest numbers I saw was like 7% of patients don't relapse, right? 93% do relapse. So that's crazy. Obviously, it's a complex treatment, so it makes sense that there's a huge relapse. But the insurance companies are now starting to create or have started and deployed programs to ensure that when treatment is provided to a patient, that it's not the patient admitted, you did this, they discharged, see you, when I see you. There's sort of a tail of follow-up that the practice itself, the treatment facilities themselves have to own, right? And so the reimbursement is actually based on the entire customer journey, not just that sort of segment of treatment where you're providing medication, groups, treatment, and then they go into the world. Because if you know anything about addiction treatment, it's a journey. It's not like a lapse in time. So there's a huge trend in that. And then, like I said before, AI is something that we've been talking about. I know our competitors and companies in our space have been putting a lot of time and effort into. For us, AI, we took a little bit of conservative approach to AI, because I think especially in the beginning of 24, when everybody was talking about ChatGPT and optimization and summarization of things and helping you just get things done faster, there was this kind of rush to call everything AI. So, you put a little widget on your application that does something that's not really AI. It's just like some optimization, you call it AI. Lots of companies calling themselves something.ai just because it's the trendy thing to do. But for us, healthcare doesn't really move fast when it comes to trends. It's usually the last industry to kind of catch up to things. Obviously, you're treating people, so you want to make sure if you're, deploying an innovation that you're ensuring that it's going to be work 100%. And so we saw a lot of companies deploy different solutions that are AI based, and some of them work really well. But we kind of took a conservative approach and we said, okay, what feature functionality, again, that 80-20 rule, right? Let's not build 10 different AI things. Let's figure out what's going to drive the most value. What feature functionality would drive the most value for our customers? And what we found out is that one of the biggest time consuming tasks that clinicians have to endure every day is writing notes. So we're having a conversation, assuming I'm a patient, you're a clinician. If you had to debrief on a note in Opus at the end of this conversation, everything that we talked about from a clinical perspective, it's a lot of time. And if you have to do that 4 or 5 times a day, or maybe you're doing a group with 20 patients, it's a huge amount of time, right? So we surveyed our customers, and pretty much all of them said this is the number one pain point for us is writing notes. And we kind of tracked down that most clinicians spend about 12 minutes per note writing them. So you've seen 5 patients a day, you're spending an hour writing notes. And the reality of the industry is that clinicians' quality of life suffers because they've got to take work home. They've got to stay after hours to write the notes, right? That's the one part that's kind of, it sucks. The second part is, I don't care how good of a clinician you are, there's no way you're going to remember 45, 50 minutes of a conversation in detail, right? And nor should you. That's not the job. The job is to help somebody understand like what their challenges are and offer insights so they can get better. So nevertheless, a note is needed. It's got to be written, but your work should not be on let me become a great writer, right? Technology can do that for you. And then there's the insurance part, which is you can be the best clinician in the world. If you don't document it, it doesn't matter, right? So we were solving for time savings by eliminating the need for them to sit there after a session or take work home. We were solving for the quality of the note, right? That's what we set out to do. Let's figure out how we can write a quality note so they don't have to sit there and do it. And we're also solving for billing because insurance companies are constantly looking for ways not to pay. That's their business, right? Is not to pay. That's how they make money. And so what happens in reality with clinicians is that they have sort of a cheat sheet, right? They have sort of an outline of how notes should be written. And at the end of every session, they just kind of copy and paste in there and make their own little tweaks. And that's the note. But guess what? Just like we have AI, insurance companies have it too. And it's very simple. That's one of the easiest things AI can do is compare documents, right? So if you just upload a bunch of notes from Acme Behavioral, you're going to notice a pattern pretty quickly. And so that's going to trigger denials and audits and things like that. So we built this AI scribe, which is it's also referred to as an ambient scribe, a listener. It's like a Zoom call recorder that listens to in-person or telehealth sessions, contextualizes the conversation based on specific note types. So there are things like SOAP note and DAP notes and things like that. And he basically drafts the note at like 99%, right? So if you imagine if we finished this podcast and this was a session, you hit write note and it automatically just happens. So in the beginning, we launched this. We did a lot of surveying with our customers and we launched this. And in the beginning, the apprehension is like, oh, is this going to replace us? Which is like, what's discussed a lot. And, we try to work with clinicians to say, look, your job as my wife is a therapist, so I know the job. Your job is to help people, is not to write notes, right? If you take pride in write your notes, that's great, but you shouldn't take away from the work that you're doing as a clinician. And slowly but surely, when they saw the results and they saw it in the aggregate of like a day and a week and a month and how much time they were taking back to just do like stuff with their family, not having to sit there and because you kind of normalize it, right? I take work home and I work 12 hours. That's what I do. But it shouldn't be that way. And so once we start seeing traction with people, just having some personal time back, the notes were incredibly well written, less insurance audits, more cash flow for the practice owner, it quickly became kind of a no-brainer. And now it's almost unheard of for us to sign up a new practice without Copilot AI. It just doesn't make sense.
And this is really brilliant in my opinion, because I have a therapist like many people in the world, in this country, and yeah, she does spend an incredible amount of time writing notes, and then sometimes we have other sessions and she doesn't fully remember. She has to go back to her notes and she misses things. And I love my therapist. She's awesome, but
she's human.
Exactly. She's human. And the fact that you were able to build something that was truly driving value, which is something that is really important that a lot of companies are missing out on, and they're going the other way, which is just creating all these AI features or adding features and putting like AI on it and labeling it as something that's artificial intelligence is something that's been happening. But the truth is that a lot of people still haven't figured out how to drive true value. So the fact that you listen to your clients, your customers, and you build something that is really a huge time saver, that's amazing. I think you guys are approaching leveraging AI the right way. So that's really interesting.
Which leads me the remembering like what you talked about last time leads me to what we're working on now with AI, which is the ability to summarize a patient's chart. We think that's useful because if somebody's coming into, I mean, again, your therapist is human, so she's seeing 5 patients a day. No way she's going to remember the last conversation you had. Maybe to some extent, but not every detail. But if you could hit a button on RIM's EMR system and say, hey, what did I talk about last time, right? What were the things that we were focusing on? And it gives you kind of like a bullet point summarization of it. You're more likely to be engaged with her or him when you go into the session because they remember, right? And also, when you're seeing a therapist, there's nothing worse than them being like on their tablet trying like writing it down. And so unless you're 100% focused on what they're saying, you're going to be missing out on you. They're going to be they may not verbalize it to you, the patient, but they might think, why isn't this therapist paying attention to me? But also the therapist is going to potentially miss out on like nuances of the conversation because there's a reason telehealth sessions are done via video. They're not done by phone. Some are, but to a certain extent, most telehealth sessions are by video because there's a lot of facial cues, and there's even AI companies that focus on the sort of the facial expressions of someone to tell the therapist in real time whether somebody's lying, for example, or somebody's like hiding something, the way they kind of frown their face, or maybe they look down when they say something. So it's really important to have the visual. And so if you're and I've seen this in real life, therapists that are seeing somebody, they're looking down at the keyboard. That just doesn't make any sense, right? So taking that away has been huge. And it's been funny because when we first launched Copilot, there was this kind of hesitance or like resistant to adopt. And now when we get on calls with users from back in the day when we do like business reviews and things like that, they're like, we could not live without Copilot. I don't know how we did our jobs before. So it's funny to see like the shift.
That's awesome. That's great. I love that you guys are, you're doing meaningful work, right? By working with, behavioral health clinicians. And there's, in a way, you are creating an impact because it's helping them do a better job. And then as a result, their patients are going to get better care. So that's already incredible. But the fact that you're using AI in such a way that is serving such purpose and creating time effectiveness, and they're at the end not just doing a better job, they're more focused, but they're also spending more time with family. I think it's one of the very rare examples where we saw a company like yours that is driving results beyond, saving time or driving productivity, and it's really impacting humans at the end in their lives. So good job. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Great. Maybe we can talk about 2025. What are some big priorities you have as a business? Are there any initiatives that you're working on? Any projects that are worth sharing with us?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been working on in 2024 and we just launched is a CRM, a built-in CRM, so a customer relationship management. In behavioral health, just like any other business, there's marketing, there's sort of like a pre-admissions work that has to be done. And so our CRM will help our practices manage that part of things. I mentioned we're building this summarization functionality with AI. Again, another one of those things that we were like, how can we drive an outsized value for our customers, right? And the summarization seems to be, from their own perspective, something that would help a lot. There is a partnership that we're going to be rolling out. I can't really disclose much information right now, but it's going to be, I think, another value driver for our customers, and it's around billing. Billing in behavioral health is very complex. I mean, billing in the US is complex, right? The healthcare system is complex to navigate from a billing perspective. And so we identified some pockets of opportunity in billing to help our customers maximize their revenue. And so we're going to be launching that. It's somewhat AI based, but mostly just aggregating billing data and giving them insights. I think those are the ones that come to mind right now.
Cool. Well, that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys are going to build the next few months this year. I always have a special place in my heart for companies that are, really creating real impact beyond, so this has been a really, really interesting conversation. If anybody wants to connect with you and even learn about what you do at Opus, what is the best way to do that?
They can visit our website, opusehr.com. They can find me on LinkedIn, Humberto Buniotto. Tough name to spell, but I think I'm probably the only one in there, so you'll find me. So those are the ways to connect with us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Humberto. It was a really great conversation. And for anybody who's listening, if you love this episode, make sure you give us a review and share it with anybody who may find it insightful. So thank you again, Humberto. Have a great year ahead, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you so much, Reem. I appreciate you having me.